Krishna. So we'll now have the Bhagavad Gita class. There's some spare Gitas around if you'd like to take one. Okay. So we're going to be reading from chapter 15, text 14. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Navalabha Girivaradari Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana Anandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay. Om Jnanatimiyandasya Gananjana Salakaya Chakjurun Militanyena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stabhitanyena Bhutaye Swayam Rupa Kadadmayam Dadati Sva Padantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Ragana Tamvitam Tam Sajivam Sadavetam Savadhutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Srivashakam Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sutadevi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpa Tarubhascha Kripa Sindhu Bhevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So today we're going to be reading from chapter 15, text 14. The chapter is entitled The Yoga of the Supreme Person. So I'm going to first of all recite the Sanskrit. Aham Vishvanaro Bhutva Vishvarpano Bhutva Prani Nam Deham Ashrita Pranapana Samayukta Pachamyanam Chaturvidam Aham Vishvarnaro Bhutva Praninam Deham Asrita Pranapana Samanyukta Pachamamyanam Chaturvidam Aham Vishvanaro Bhutva Praninam Deham Asrita Pranapana Samayukta Pachamyanam Chaturvidam. Would anyone like to try recite, do a recitation of the verse, and if you'd like to. Yeah? Aham Vishvarano Bhutva Praninam Deham Asrita Pranapana Samanyukta Pachamyanam Chaturvidam. Thank you. Aham Vishvarnaro Bhutva Praninam Deham Asrita Pranapana Samayukta Pachamyanam Chaturvidam. And the translation. I am the fire of digestion in the bodies of all living entities, and I join with the air of life, outgoing and incoming, to digest the four kinds of foodstuff. So Krishna says, I am the fire of digestion in the bodies of all living entities, and I join with the air of life, outgoing and incoming, to digest the four kinds of foodstuff. and purport. So by His divine grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. According to Ayurvedic Shastra, we understand that there is a fire in the stomach which digests all food sent here. When the fire is not blazing, there is no hunger. And when the fire is in order, we become hungry. Sometimes when the fire is not going nicely, treatment is required. In any case, this fire is representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Vedic mantras, Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad 591, also confirm that the Supreme Lord or Brahman is situated in the form of fire within the stomach and is digesting all food, all kinds of foodstuff. Ayam Agnir Vishvanaro Yam Yo Yam Antaha Purushe Yenadam Anam Pachyate. Therefore, since he is helping the digestion of all kinds of foodstuff, the living entity is not independent in the eating process. Unless the Supreme Lord helps him in digesting, there is no possibility of eating. He thus produces and digests foodstuff, and by his grace we are enjoying life. In the Vedanta Sutra 1227, this is also confirmed. Sabda debyo nitaha pratistanachcha. The Lord is situated within sound and within the body, within the air, and even within the stomach as a digestive force. There are 4 kinds of foodstuff. Some are drunk, some are chewed, some are licked up, and some are sucked. And He is the digestive force for all of them. So this is discussing in terms of the Lord's different energies. And so we understand that everything is actually Lord Shri Krishna, but yet Krishna is a person, an individual person. So he says everything is that everything is him, but yet he is not in everything. So Krishna actually, he remains aloof as the Supreme Lord by his different energies. Everything we see is Krishna, but yet Krishna as a person is still completely aloof. So this is the nature of the Supreme Person, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He has no actual duties like us. He's completely free and independent. So that's why we call, as we discussed previously, that the Lord's pastimes, what we call Leela. So the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he's not he's completely independent, and he doesn't have to. He's not obliged to do anything. So this is why his pastimes, they're called Leela, which means play. So this is what the Supreme Lord does. Everything that he does is actually called play. And this is not like, as we understand, a play in this material world is not. It's a sensible play, which means that he's actually does activities which are not obliged in that sense. So, as we discussed, that everything is actually Lord Shri Krishna. He has his internal energy, and then this material existence which we see is his external energy. And then we, the living entities, were called the marginal energy. So Krishna is Achyutya, which means that he's infallible. So Krishna is always aloof and independent from what we call the material influence, or the material atmosphere. But us as living entities, we are prone to be, we're Achyutya, which is fallible. So we're prone to actually for fall and actual to become in contact with material nature. So this means that we get conditioned by this material world. So there's so many different living entities in this material world. It's described in the Bhagavad Gita that there's 8,400,000 living entities. And these are all classified in different terms of consciousness. So there's the plant life, the aquatics, there's more beasts, and it goes up to eventually to the human form of life. So in terms of the animals, they're completely they run on their instincts. So they don't actually, they're not liable for karma. But in terms of the living entity, we have a choice. So we actually create new karma, and this is why the human form of life is so important, because we have the opportunity to actually inquire about the bigger questions in life, about who we are, what we are doing here, and then what do we have to do as a result. But in terms of this material world, Srila Prabhupada describes in his purports, especially in the Srimad Bhagavatam also, that the nature of this world is actually full of envy is in terms of the living entities. So it's described that that a conditioned soul is actually, they have this envy which manifests in terms of every other living entity. So naturally, there's a lot of discord in this material world. And that's the nature also of material existence, is that all the way that it's set up is that it's survival of the fittest. So in terms of foodstuff and everything, we can see that all the different living entities, they naturally pick on they eat from what's their prey, or what's more easy to have for those. So in terms of, as it's discussed, that Krishna is the fire of digestion, and when this is running properly as well, then we can actually eat more. So this is Ayurveda, and it's discussed in terms of actual spiritual life, that the yogi is one who he does not eat too much or eat too little, sleep too much or sleep too little, but he actually Radha Kulananda ki, Sita Ram Laxman Hanuman ki, Gora Nitai ki, Jai. So the yogi does not eat too much or eat too little. So in terms of actual spiritual life, we try and become regulated. We realize that everything is Krishna's energy. And Krishna says in the Sri Upanishad that one should not take more than their quota, knowing well to whom everything belongs. So everything belongs to the Supreme Lord. It's all His energy. So therefore everything is sacred. And this material world, from the Vedic perspective, it's known as the place of death, actually. So everything here in this material world goes through 6 different stages. So naturally it's born, it grows, it stays for some time, produces some byproducts, such as like even children and so on as well. And then naturally everything will eventually start to dwindle and eventually vanish. So this is what takes place for every single living being, and even the universe itself will eventually vanish as well and re-emerge. So That's why this material world is known as that everything has to actually eventually perish, and this is how we have to survive as well. So we can't have foodstuff without without actually having to kill another living entity. So we know that a lot of the world eats meat, and in Krishna consciousness we don't have meat, but we have a vegetarian diet. But even if you kill, you have to kill plants and so on to live as well. So naturally we have to live at the expense of other living entities. Yes, we have a question. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's very good. Yeah, that's what I was going to get to actually. So, yeah, no. So thank you very much. So that's why we actually Krishna says, so one who does not offer this to Krishna, so they eat verily sin. So naturally, if we eat things naturally due to this karmic situation where we have to actually inflict and intrude on other living entities, and then that's actually is going to give us sinful reactions. So for this reason, by Krishna's mercy, says whatever it is, a leaf or water or so on, so we can just offer it to Krishna. And Krishna, he knows that he actually, we know what he likes and what he accepts. So we can actually, by Krishna's mercy, we can offer it to Krishna, and Krishna will actually honor the food stuff, and then it will become sanctified food stuff, which we call prasadam. So prasadam means mercy. So this is Krishna's mercy. And also in terms of abstaining from meat eating, this is one of the 4 regulative principles, and this actually correlates with mercy in terms of the 4 pillars of religion. So I wonder if there's any more questions. Yes, Mataji. The 4 pillars of religion, they are austerity, mercy, mercy. Sorry, I was trying to rack my mind. Sorry, austerity, cleanliness, and austerity, mercy, cleanliness. Yes, please. Sorry, I'm trying to think. And truthfulness. Sorry. Yeah. So these 4 pillars of religion, they correspond with the 4 regulative principles which we follow. So in terms of no meat eating, so this relates to as we mentioned already, to mercy, and then also in terms of intoxication, this relates to austerity. So we can see in the material world, when people, like let's just say they're after a busy week at work, and then this is austerity. So people, they sometimes they say, oh, let's they might want to take like a intoxication or a drink or something like this, but so this is people trying to escape austerity. So this is why intoxication corresponds with austerity. So and then in terms of illicit sex, this corresponds with cleanliness. So this is not just external cleanliness, but actually internal cleanliness. And then gambling as well also corresponds with truthfulness. So it's said in the Srimad Bhagavatam, it's spoken about in the time of Maharaj Parikshit, and this is from the Mahabharata. And then the symptoms of Kali, he became aware that he had entered his kingdom. So then he went to go and find where these had entered. So he went with his sword. And then he found a man dressed, I believe, in a suit, or dressed very highly, and he was, he had cut off 3 legs so far of a bull, and then the actual 4th leg was still standing, and this was so this corresponds with the different ages. So we're currently in the age of Kali Yuga, and this is actually, it's known as the darkest age of the 4 ages. And so in terms of the 3 legs, this is symbolic because that they're not standing. This means that the other actual pillars, these represent the 4 pillars of religion, and 3 of them are not fully existent in this age, but they're still, what we have left is truthfulness. And this is described that's still shaky as well. So yeah, it's still shaky even. Sorry, Matthew, it's charity. Yeah. Yeah, I suppose it's kind of described in terms of truthfulness, that people can be still mostly truthful, even though they're conditioned. So naturally, as we can see in this day and age, like meat eating and intoxication are just taken for granted, but people are still have somewhat truthfulness, even if they're conditioned. And also it was said that Kali was not so happy with this, and he wanted to reside somewhere else. And so Maharaj Parikshit, with his sword, it's a pastime where he banished Kali. And this is why, so these Kali, which is the dark influence of this age, resides in these places where these activities will actually take place. So in terms of, there was one more as well where he resided. So as we can see in many public houses, or where people drink alcohol, and all these different places that correspond, this is where Kali's influence will take place. And he also he asked if there was one more place where he could reside, and then he resided, he told, where there's so much wealth. So also when there's too much wealth, people also can become under the influence of Kali. So and that's why it's said actually that in terms of for people to actually be able to naturally take to spiritual life, it's more easy when they have less wealth, because it's said that it's well known that money doesn't make us happy, but when people have a lot of excess wealth, they don't tend to be able to focus so much on spiritual life. But obviously, for someone who takes to Krishna consciousness, if they have wealth, they can see it as a gift of the Lord also, and something that can be used in the Lord's service as well. Is there any more questions? Sorry, the life after death, yes. So, it said, Dehinos minyata dehe kovram yovanum jara tata dehantir praptir dira tatra namuyate. So, as the embodied living being passes from boyhood to youth to old age, similarly, the soul at the time of death passes on to another body. So, at the time of death, we will have a certain destination, and we have this destination is not fixed, but we have the choice and our free will to actually influence that destination. So it said that one will take birth based on their their actual desires and their karma. So based on these things, we will take birth. But it said in the Bhagavad Gita that those who actually worship the demigods will go to the abodes of the demigods, and those who worship Krishna will go to Krishna. So naturally, in terms of bhakti and devotion, well, we don't want to stay in this material world. We want to transcend and go back home, what we call back to Godhead, which is the abode of Lord Shri Krishna. So what's described as the demigods are like all these demigods. They're like different departmental heads in a government. So they're actual administrators of the Lord, and they're to go to their abodes is still within this material world. So Krishna he also says, Janma karma chame devyam evam yo veti taktvadaham panarjanma neti mam eti so Arjuna, that one who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities will attain my eternal abode, Arjuna. Of this there is no doubt. So those who can understand Lord Krishna and his actual transcendental nature will attain Lord Krishna's abode. And this is what we all want and we all wish for, is to finally be done with this material world. Yes.
I've heard something that Prabhupada said about how demigods are actually queuing up to take birth on this planet.
Yes.
Because it gives us
Yes.
suffering and enjoyment.
Yeah. So naturally, the demigods, they're servants of Lord Shri Krishna, and so in this day and age, which we call the Kali Yuga, the Yuga Dharma, which is the actual duty in this age that we can all, which is recommended, it was inaugurated by Lord Chaitanya in his Sankirtan movement. So Lord Chaitanya is Krishna himself, and he manifested here over 500 years ago. So this is actually the Sankirtan movement, which means to actually to glorify the Lord and to chant the Lord's holy names. So we have a very simple and sublime process, whereby in different ages it wasn't so easy actually, and that's why this is recommended, because in this age we're actually less qualified, because it's more difficult to practice spiritual life due to the actual atmosphere and the climate, where there's so many distractions, and life is so fast paced as well, that we live for in generally a maximum 100-year period, and this is why Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement is actually, because we're less qualified, he has given us extra mercy, whereby we can chant his holy name, which is very simple and sublime, in that there's no hard and fast rules, that anyone can chant it, and they can chant it anywhere and everywhere. Because in different ages there was different processes of yoga, like Ashtanga yoga, which were recommended, whereby yogis would for long periods at a time sit in meditation posture, which is a very difficult to actually execute, and this is why this is the recommended process for the sage. So there's three things that we do actually, which is, in terms of, we mentioned prasadam. So it's very simple and sublime, is that we feast, we chant, we feast, and we dance, so we can actually have a wonderful time and achieve the goal of life in that sense. But likewise, it's still recommended in terms of feasting, that we can feast on the Lord's prasadam, but we still have to become controlled as well. Yeah. Is that okay, Maji? Yes. You.
Maybe does the sun-time movement exist in other, any other planets in the planetary system? Or is
Um,
it only here on Earth?
I believe it exists in the other planetary systems because it was actually Narad Muni, and he used to be what he called a Gandharva, which is like a heavenly singer, and he was invited to like it was actually I believe a Sankirtan a Sankirtan party, and then but he committed an offence, and he actually um, he was just more focused on dancing with the heavenly apsaras, which is like the heavenly damsels, and he was glorifying the demigods rather than the Supreme Lord. And this is why he was cursed to take birth in planet Earth, whereby he actually, and then he became who he is now, Narad Muni, in that sense. So this was actually, from what I remember reading, is that he was cursed at which was more like a Sankirtan party or Sankirtan festival. So, but I believe it's more the nature of the actual heavenly planets is that it's much more. It's like we can't imagine how more opulent it is. It's like thousands of times more opulent, but it's also because of the nature of the heavenly planet. It's we become more absorbed there, and it's not so easy to actually practice devotional life. That's why it says the demigods are queuing up to take part here. Yeah. Yes. And yes, Marie.
Earlier you mentioned that conditioned souls have prestige and envy within them.
Yes.
I just wondered what can we do to help these conditioned souls remove their envy, or at least protect ourselves from their envy?
Yeah. Well, I suppose the thing is to understand that it's even though it's not always manifest in some ways, but it's always that we are all actually conditioned in this, and even in a subtle way. So because we're here, it's also it might not be manifest so strongly in that sense, but it's said that every conditioned living entity, which we all are conditioned, is actually it said that the seating places of lust are in our senses, our mind, and our intelligence. So naturally, the way to become purified by this is to actually engage in devotional service. So we have to actually engage in the Lord's service, so that we don't actually we can feed our good actually tendencies, nourish our devotional nature, which is our true inherent nature, is that we're actually eternal servants. And so it's like it's kind of, as I heard it's described like this, that um, as we know, this saying is like we have one good good person and one bad person, but it's kind of described as two dogs even. So um, the dog that will bark the loudest is the one which we feed. So naturally, if we are focused, we will naturally hear our good voice, and our good tendencies will become more stronger. Yeah. So Gora Arti will be starting soon. I'm not sure if there's any final question. Oh, sorry. Sorry. Yeah. Thank you, Mataji. Yes, so Krishna says, whatever we do, we offer to Krishna and do for Krishna. And as what Mataji mentioned as well, is like that this material body, it's like Srila Prabhupada gives the example that it's like a car. And we may, with this material world, we're so, in terms of the body, we might like fill up the car all the time, but we better not forget to feed the driver. And the driver is actually our true self, the soul. So it's best that we always keep engaged in our true nature, which is service and the process of Krishna consciousness. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So thanks very much, and we better finish here because we'll have Gaur Arti in a moment. So Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki. All glories to assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mati.